All right. Cindy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Jenny.
Can you send Jessica Yar the login information for the Zoom?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry we are starting a few minutes late, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here for the public workshop through Zoom and YouTube for a public workshop focused on the CV SALTS Nitrate Control Program, Priority 2, Preliminary Management Zone Proposals, or PMZPs, and the Early Action Plans, or EAPs, that are included in the PMZPs. I wanted to let you know that we are going to make a small switch in the beginning of our agenda, doing the virtual meeting logistics part first, and then the introductions and opening comments.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll repeat that in Spanish for the benefit of our Spanish-speaking audience. Hola y bienvenidos a todos. Gracias por unirse al taller público de hoy a través de nuestra reunión de Zoom y por la transmisión en vivo de YouTube. El taller público de hoy se centra en las propuestas preliminares de zonas de gestión de prioridad 2 y del programa de control de nitratos, o CV SALTS y PMZP por sus siglas en inglés, y los planes de acción temprana, que están incluidos, claro, en las propuestas preliminares. Quería informarles que vamos a hacer un pequeño ajuste al principio de nuestra agenda, haciendo primero la parte de logística de la reunión virtual y luego las presentaciones y comentarios de apertura. Thank you, Jenny. Go ahead.
Gracias. If you are joining through the Zoom meeting, simultaneous language interpretation in Spanish is available. Today's interpreters are Mark Gutierrez and Jeanette Hernandez. Thank you for your interpretation today, Mark and Jeanette. They will help me explain how to access the Spanish language interpretation channel right now, and once they have finished explaining it, I will then enable the Spanish channel for you to access their interpretation. For people who would like language interpretation, please select the language interpretation channel by clicking on the interpretation feature with the globe icon in the meeting controls at the bottom of your screen. Please select Spanish and select Mute Original Audio. It is important that you select Spanish and then click Finish so that you can hear the presentation and comments.
Y si se une a través de la reunión de Zoom, hay interpretación simultánea en español disponible. Los intérpretes de hoy serán su servidor, Mark Gutiérrez, y Jeanette Hernández. Y vamos a explicar cómo acceder a la interpretación en español ahorita mismo. Ya que lo hayamos explicado, se habilitará la función para poder acceder a la interpretación. Para las personas que deseen interpretación en otro idioma, seleccione el canal de interpretación por buscar la función que aparece en la parte inferior de su pantalla con un icono de un globo terráqueo que dice Interpretation o Interpretación. De ahí selecciónelo y luego seleccione su idioma Spanish o español. De ahí puede silenciar el audio original por tocar Mute Original Audio. Es importante que seleccione español y luego que seleccione finalizar para poder escuchar la presentación y los comentarios en su idioma. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Jenny. Back to you.
Gracias. Un momento. All right, that has been enabled. Thank you. All right, that's been enabled. Thank you. Sorry, I'm hearing a lot of echoing. I'm trying to fix that. I'm going to continue, and if it keeps happening, I will work on it. For today's workshop,
Jeanette, I think that might be coming from you. I don't know if you need to be muted in this forum.
For today's workshop, let me see if I needed to. Jeanette, are you in the?
Is it possibly the Spanish interpretation that we're hearing?
Jeanette, are you in the? Sorry, hold on, everyone.
Is it possibly the Spanish interpretation that we're hearing?
Jenny, that is the YouTube feeding back. So if somebody is watching YouTube with their microphone on,
Got it.
that's where it's coming from. That's why you hear the delay, because there's a delay to the YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see anybody not on mute at this point, though, other than Jenny.
I think I muted Jeanette, and I think hopefully that will work.
Okay.
Well, I feel like I just did Jeanette. I muted Jeanette, and I think hopefully that. I really apologize, everyone. Well, I feel like I just did Jeanette.
So it definitely appears to be an IT issue because everybody is muted.
Do you want me to? Holly, do you have an idea, or Jean?
I do not. I don't have YouTube open over here.
Holly, do you have an idea, or Jean? Holly, do you want me to log out and then log back in?
No,
No,
oh,
because
you are the host.
Okay. I'm just not sure what to do.
If you look at the microphone volume knobs, that feedback does seem to be coming from Jenny's microphone.
So Jenny, do you have YouTube open on your computer somewhere?
You know what? I think in the background of the Delta room, I had the Zoom open. So I just closed it all. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was up.
Oh, the YouTube?
Not the YouTube, but the Zoom. I think that might have fixed it. You know what? I think in the background of the Delta room, I had the Zoom open.
I'm going to come by.
Apologies, everybody. I don't know, Jean, if you can assume the host responsibilities from Jenny and let her log off and log back in.
You know, Jenny, if you did mute for a few seconds, we could at least diagnose if it is on your end or not. So I'm just going to keep talking for 5 or 10 seconds and we'll see if the issue has stopped. Maybe someone else could reply to me and test it out.
That's accurate. It is coming from Jenny.
So what I'm going to suggest, Jenny, while you guys get that going, is I'm going to pull up your slides on my end. the final version you sent me this morning, right? And then I can take over and just get the meeting going.
I think we fixed it, everyone. Oh my gosh. I apologize. All right. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Sounds great.
Really apologize for that. We are back in business. Thank you for hanging in there. Hope everyone can appreciate technical difficulties. Thank you so much. All right. I will bring up my screen and continue our meeting. Okay, thank you. Today's workshop is being hosted through Zoom and it is being recorded. There is also an option to watch live and listen to the live webcast on YouTube at the web address listed on the slide. For all the presenters and speakers, just a reminder to speak slowly and clearly so we can ensure the interpreters can capture today's conversation. I have also put a link in the chat to our CV SALTS webpage with links to the public notice in English and Spanish, public comments received for the PMZPs and EAPs, and the agenda for today. This workshop is for informational purposes only and no formal action will be taken today. Later on in the workshop, there will be an opportunity for public comment or to ask questions. If you would like to provide a public comment at that time, please use the raise hand feature. Please do not use the chat feature to make a comment. Please only use the chat feature for issues with technical difficulties. My name is Jenny Fuller and I work for the CV SALTS program at the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. Today, we appreciate being joined by Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control members Denise Kadara and Elena Lee Reeder. Central Valley Water Board Executive Officer Patrick Palupa, Assistant Executive Officer Adam Lapitz, Legal Counsel Jessica Yar, and our CV SALTS team consisting of Meredith Howard, who will be helping us with the timekeeping today, Cindy Au Young, True Kang, Charlie Johnson, Nate Willow, and Bethany Soto. We are also grateful to have our Management Zone panelists and Environmental Justice panelists participating in the workshop today, and we appreciate their presenting and being here. I will now invite the board members to make any opening remarks they would like to make.
All right, good morning. I'm glad to be here and have this workshop take place. We've been having a lot of discussions on the CV SALTS program and the from when it was adopted back in 2018. So here we are, and we're really hoping to get some great feedback from those in the audience participating in this workshop. And we look forward to a great work session today and something we will be wanting to bring back before the Central Valley board in the near future. So thank you very much for the staff, all of those participating, and we're hoping for some good results from the workshop today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Board Member Kadara. Board Member Reeder, did you have any comments you wanted to make?
Hey everyone, I just wanted to say good morning and thank you for putting in the time to get together today to get this very important work done. I'm very excited to see us progress further. Denise and I have been overseeing the Priority 1 Zone growth and progress, and today we get to kick off Priority 2. So very exciting stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Board Member Reeder. I will now invite Patrick Palupa, our Executive Officer, to make his opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I do, always want to thank both IT and the interpretation services that are being provided today. Really do an excellent job facilitating these meetings and enabling broad participation from the community. It's certainly easier to participate remotely for many of you than it is to come down to Rancho Cordova, much as we do like our Rancho Cordova office. Sometimes it's a little more convenient for a 2-hour meeting. to participate from your home. I do want to encourage everybody to both listen to what folks have to say and raise concerns if you see concerns as we begin implementation of the phase 2 early action plans. I think we've got, it is remarkable to see the transformation of the drinking water program as it's maturing. There are a lot of lessons learned that have been baked into the proposals that have been submitted to the Central Valley Water Board, such that I do think that the priority 2 early action plans are more advanced and more receptive to community input than the priority 1 early action plans. And that's not necessarily for lack of trying, it's just for an outgrowth of the fact that we've learned a lot, and the management zones have learned a lot as we've been implementing this program. Certainly, there will be a lot of continued discussion about both the early action plans and the implementation of this program. We are marching forward under priority 1, and we'll likely have consideration of many of the management zone implementation plans and of all the metrics and requirements that will be built into all the permits to implement those in the relatively near future. Those are matters that are currently pending before the board, and so there are certain limitations on those discussions as we kind of move ahead with that. So this would really be an opportunity to focus and learn and discuss concerns about the priority 2 management zones and the issues that we have with the early action plans there. But I do want to thank everybody for the investment of time and energy that they've put into both this presentation and to putting the plans forward for the board. And with that, we'll turn it back to you, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And I echo your gratitude for IT and the interpreters helping us reach a broad audience today. So thank you for that. The purpose of today's workshop is to develop a shared understanding of CV SALT's history, the Nitrate Control Program Priority 2 groundwater basins and management zones, and the recently submitted Preliminary Management Zone Proposals, or PMZPs, and the associated Early Action Plans, or EAPs. Another goal of today's workshop is to gather input and comments regarding the submitted PMZPs and EAPs for the Central Valley Water Board to take into consideration for the next steps on program implementation. Today's agenda will cover a background on CV SALTS, an overview of the Nitrate Control Program, an overview of the Preliminary Management Zone Proposals, and the associated Early Action Plans. We will also have a presentation by an environmental justice panel, an opportunity for public comments, and a question and answer and discussion section at the end of the workshop. If anyone has time constraints for commenting or questions, please raise your hand and let us know. I would now like to discuss the ground rules of this workshop. Please treat this as a public discussion and not a debate. The purpose is not to win an argument, but to hear and respect the perspectives and ideas shared today. Please listen actively and with an open mind. We can better understand others' perspectives when we try to see things from their lens. You can respect another person's point of view without agreeing with them. And please stay on point and on time. We have limited time today. Please respect the group's time and help give everyone an opportunity to be heard. Please keep comments brief and to the point. When a topic has been discussed fully, please do not bring it back up. CV SALTS stands for Central Valley Salinity Alternatives for Long-Term Sustainability. CV SALTS is a collective effort by many interested parties within the Central Valley community that began in 2006. Interested parties include many communities and industries, including agriculture, dairies, and municipalities with treatment works. Together with the Central Valley Water Board, State Water Board, and Central Valley Salinity Coalition, we are all working together to find solutions that are reasonable, feasible, and practicable to address the impacts of salinity and nitrates on water quality in the Central Valley. The main goals and priorities for CV SALTS are to ensure and provide safe drinking water supply through both short and long-term solutions, to reduce salt and nitrate loading so that ongoing discharges neither threaten to degrade high-quality waters nor cause or contribute to exceedances of water quality objectives, and to implement long-term managed restoration of impaired water bodies. Specific to nitrates, this goal focuses on restoration of groundwater quality. Here's a brief history on the amendments made to the water quality control plans, which are also known as basin plans, that incorporated CV salts into regulations. On May 31st, 2018, the Central Valley Water Board adopted the Salt and Nitrate Control Program Basin Plan Amendment, Resolution R5-2018-0034. On October 16th, 2019, the State Board conditionally approved the Salt and Nitrate Control Program, with directions to make targeted revisions to the original amendment within 1 year of approval. While the revisions were being made, the Central Valley Water Board began implementation of the Nitrate Control Program. On December 10th, 2020, the Central Valley Water Board adopted a Basin Plan Amendment with targeted revisions to the Salt and Nitrate Control Program. On June 1st, 2021, the State Water Board approved the revisions to the Salt and Nitrate Control Program with Resolution 2021-0019. For CV salts, we have a salt control program and a nitrate control program. Today, we are focusing specifically on the nitrate control program, which is a prioritized control program for groundwater only. This program involves 2 permitting paths: the individual permitting approach, or Path A, and the collective management zone permitting approach, or Path B. For the purpose of today's discussion, we are focusing on the management zone permitting approach, Path B, and the recently submitted preliminary management zone proposals and associated early action plans, which are deliverables for the management zone permitting approach. There are several sources of nitrate that contribute to elevated nitrate levels, which include agriculture, from irrigation, fertilizer use, and manure; industry activities, including manufacturing and processing facility wastewater and oil and gas extraction; municipalities, with nitrate sources from wastewater treatment effluent, biosolids, and fertilizer use; and residential activities through use of septic tanks, fertilizers, and landfills. On the right is a heat map showing the nitrate concentrations in the Central Valley. Red areas indicate concentrations over 10 milligrams per liter that we are concerned with. Orange and yellow areas also indicate relatively high levels of nitrate contributions to groundwater that have been accumulating over many years. Where nitrate concentrations are over the nitrate drinking water standard of 10 milligrams per liter, there is significant concern that we have for public health. There are also significant economic costs involved in treatment and in providing alternative water supplies for the communities that are affected by nitrate issues. And there are diverse sources of nitrate throughout the Central Valley to be managed, as mentioned in the prior slide, where many industries contribute to the nitrate problems. The management zone permitting approach, or Path B, involves a shared and collective responsibility amongst dischargers for implementation of nitrate reduction solutions and drinking water solutions. For dischargers that are above the nitrate standard, permitting Path B allows for an exception from the nitrate standard, provided they take actions toward achieving compliance, and it also requires that the management zone provides safe drinking water to affected communities and residents in the management zone as a short-term solution for impacted drinking water sources. Nitrate Control Program implementation is prioritized to first address health risks associated with nitrate-impacted drinking water. Prioritized groundwater basins and subbasins in the Central Valley have been identified based on ambient nitrate conditions in groundwater and the degree of water quality concerns for nitrate. Priority 1 management zones were developed in the red areas. Management zones in these areas have developed management zone implementation plans and presented these MZPs as an informational agenda item at the April 19th, 2024 Central Valley Water Board hearing. Priority 2 management zones were recently developed in the orange areas and submitted the PMZPs and EAPs we are discussing today. A public comment period regarding those PMZPs and EAPs was held from the 30th of December 2024 to the 27th of January 2025. Those comment letters have been posted on our Central Valley Water Board CV SALTS webpage, which is linked in the chat. The Central Valley Water Board staff is currently reviewing these PMZPs and EAPs and is taking public comments from the letters and the comments in this workshop to account for in the review. On the 26th of February 2025, implementation of the EAPs is anticipated to begin, and the notices of intent from all Priority 2 permittees are due as well. The notices of intent indicate which permitting approach, path A or B, the permittee has chosen. The remaining areas on the map in green are non-prioritized areas and will be addressed on a case-by-case basis, with implementation phasing in after the nitrate problems in the Priority 1 and 2 areas have begun to be addressed. This map shows Priority 2 groundwater basins, which include Yolo, Eastern San Joaquin, Delta Mendota, Merced, and almost all of the Madera Basin, each their own respective management zone, with Valley Water Collaborative as the administrator. Almost all of the Tulare Lake Basin and a portion of the Madera Basin is administered by the Kings Water Alliance, and Kern Poso Subbasin, Kern Westside South Subbasin, and a portion of the Tulare Lake Basin are administered by the Kern Water Collaborative. In December 2023, the Central Valley Water Board sent notice to comply letters to dischargers in Priority 2 basins, which started program implementation and a timeline for management zone deliverables. Preliminary management zone proposals and early action plans were submitted by the 8 Priority 2 management zones on December 30th, 2024. Just a note, the due date in the notice to comply was December 28th, 2024, but since that date was a Saturday, the management zones were granted an extension to the next business day, which was Monday, December 30th, 2024. The deadline for nitrate control program permittees to choose a permitting approach, path A or path B, is February 26, 2025. This is also the date that the early action plan implementation starts, unless there are revisions requested from the Central Valley Water Board for an early action plan. Final management zone proposals and management zone implementation plans will be due by the specified timeframes after approvals are received from the Central Valley Water Board for the previous submittals. The nitrate control program describes requirements that a PMZP include the following: proposed boundaries of the management zone, participants and dischargers in the management zone, initial assessment of groundwater conditions, the current treatment and control efforts, initial identification of public water supplies or domestic wells with nitrate concentrations exceeding the water quality objective, and an early action plan that addresses immediate drinking water needs. The nitrate control program describes requirements that an early action plan include the following: a process to identify residents, outreach to ensure residents have opportunity to participate in development of early action plans, a process for coordinating with others that are not dischargers to address drinking water issues, affected residents, water systems, environmental justice organizations, and other interested parties, specific actions and implementation schedule, and a funding mechanism for implementing the EAP. We will now transition to the management zone panel with Tess Dunham, Deborah Dunn from the Kings Water Alliance Management Zone, Nicole Bell from the Kern Water Collaborative Management Zone, and Perry Klassen from the Valley Water Management Zone. They will provide an overview of the preliminary management zone proposals and early action plans and give specifics of each management zone. After this panel, we will take a 10-minute break. All right, Tess, you can bring up your slides. I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Jenny, can everybody see my slides okay?
They're not in presentation mode, but I can see them.
Perfect. I will get it over to presentation mode.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tess.
All right, how about that?
Perfect. Thank you, Tess.
Great. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, board members, Kadera and Reader, for joining us today. Glad that you were able to be here. My name is Tess Dunham. I am an attorney with Consrace and Conway in Sacramento, and I have been working with the Central Valley Salinity Coalition, CV SALTS, and the management zones for a number of years. And I have the honor here this morning of providing a preliminary overview of what the priority 2 areas have been doing in order to ramp up and take on the program and be a operating management zone on the day necessary. So with that, and as Jenny already said, joining me today to represent the management zones, we have Deborah Dunn from the Kings Water Alliance, Nicole Bell from the Kern Water Collaborative, and Perry Clausen from the Valley Water Collaborative. They will each provide specifics with respect to their programs and what they've been doing, but I'll provide a general overview of what we've been doing collectively. First, this slide is very similar to what Jenny showed just previously, but just to give you all a little understanding of the different types of governance approaches that the priority 2 management zones have developed in order to administer the management zone program. This is a little bit different than the original priority 1 areas, and in large part because we learned a fair amount. But first we have, I would say, the Valley Water Collaborative is an umbrella organization that provides administrative services to a number of different management zones. And Perry Clausen will be able to explain how they have brought that program together and the role that the advisory committees play for each different management zone. We also have the administration of the Tulare Lake Basin by the Kings Water Alliance. So again, an existing organization that also has a priority 1. Same with Valley Water Collaborative. They have priority 1 and priority 2 areas. And now we have a new organization for Kern called the Kern Water Collaborative that will function somewhat as an umbrella organization as well, but has taken on multiple basins within the Kern County area and a tiny sliver of Tulare Lake Basin. And collectively, those help to cover all of the priority 2 areas as well as the priority 1 areas, meaning that with these new organizations, only the green zones do not have management zones. As Jenny indicated, the regional board will look to determine when application of the nitrate control program would be appropriate to the green areas. Industries participating in the priority 2 management zones are the same and similar to those in the priority 1 areas. Of course, irrigated agriculture and dairy, being a big part of the Central Valley, are very active participants in all of the priority 2 management zones. A little bit less in some areas for dairy as we get into the far north of the far north of the valley. Poultry participates where they have poultry facilities. We have food processing and wineries, food processors, wastewater treatment plants, both city-owned or publicly owned treatment works, as well as some private systems as well that participate. We have landfills and composting facilities. We have small wastewater systems, again, some of those private package plant type facilities. And in Kern County, we have oil and gas, which is unique to the Kern County Kern Water Collaborative and in the Kern County basins, as oil and gas is not happening, is not operating in the other priority 2 areas or the priority 1 areas, but is in Kern County, and so they are participating in the Kern Water Collaborative. What have we been doing over the last couple of years to get ready for the launch of the management zone program in the priority 2 areas? Well, we have been busy. We have been the Irrigated Lands Coalitions in the dairy and bovine industry, provided substantial funding to support those priority 2 basins with the early implementation actions that need to be done, such as developing the preliminary management zone proposal, in order to make sure that we are ready to go and launched, and that the programs and the documents were timely submitted in December. Budgets have been set for all of the priority 2 management zones to cover program implementation, and that includes being ready to conduct well testing, outreach, and provide water supplies on the first day of 60 days after submittal of the management zone proposals, and assuming conditional approval from the Central Valley Water Board. Well, everybody is ready to go. Budgets have been set. Money is being collected to make sure the program is funded adequately. Boy, I sure can't talk this morning. I guess I need more coffee. Adequately, and is ready to go. The management zone participants are covering the expenditures. The cost allocation approach is done within each priority 2 area based upon the presence of the industries that are involved. And they basically have participation agreements in place for those that have already decided to participate in the priority 2 management zone. Come February, when the notices of intent are due by others that have yet to decide, those that select the priority 2 management zone pathway will then be receiving participation agreements at that time. Steps that have been taken in order to make sure that we could submit the preliminary management zone proposals and the early action plans timely has included, over the last 12 to 24 months, getting themselves organized, creating new organizations such as the Kern Water Collaborative, or organizing and establishing advisory committees under the Valley Water Collaborative, and then in the extension to Tulare Lake Basin within the Kings Water Alliance. Basically, as with any new organization, they've done everything. They have built online platforms, they have created social media, they have worked to make sure that they have a program and a plan in place. They have conducted outreach to potential management zone participants, i.e. those that still have to decide whether they want to submit a notice of intent or not. They have conducted outreach to other interested stakeholders, communities and residents, and public interest organizations and others. For the development of the preliminary management zone proposal, significant technical work was necessary in order to make sure the analysis was done in time in order to be included within the preliminary management zone proposals. That technical work includes characterizing basin groundwater quality, creating detailed maps of projected nitrate levels, identifying communities with potentially elevated risk, and preparing early action plans. Future submittals, of course, for the final management zone proposal and the management zone implementation plan will be dependent upon when we receive approvals of the preliminary management zone proposals and the early action plans, but they will start working on those forthwith. All of the priority 2 areas did submit their preliminary management zone proposals and the early action plans timely on December 30th, 2024. Prior to submitting their documents to the Regional Water Board at the end of December, the priority 2 areas did release their preliminary management zone proposals and their early action plans in an administrative draft format, and noticed that they were out there for availability in order to receive early input from stakeholders and community groups. The management zones priority 2 areas have been working diligently to make sure that they are ready to go in order to implement the early action plan come February 26th. They have put into place, or are in the process of putting into place, contracts for water delivery services and for sampling to make sure that sampling can be done once applications are received. They are working on their community outreach efforts and underway to make sure that they can advertise as quickly as possible the availability of well testing and bottled water delivery for those whose wells test above the 10 for nitrate, and are evaluating potential use of point of use installations. Will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, but the first and foremost important action is to advertise the program and offer free well testing as soon as possible. As I said, water sampling is also ready to go. They've been contracting with appropriate consultants or laboratories to make sure that all of the contracts are in place upon approval of the program. And so wells can get sampled quickly after receiving applications from residents in the area. We also have had the advantage in the priority 2 areas to coordinate with the priority 1s and to be able to learn from what has been happening in the priority 1 areas, which has been greatly helpful to the priority 2s. And in fact, we do meet collectively on a regular basis, i.e. monthly. And collectively, we address common issues and challenges for the management zones that we see across the board for both priority 1 and priority 2s. We are constantly sharing those lessons learned, different approaches to outreach and coordination, and working collectively with others, including other organizations such as groundwater sustainability agencies, self-help, clean water, CWC, and the Regional Water Board, as well as coordinating approaches for obtaining safer funding to help expand the program to more than just nitrate. Just again, here is just a quick timeline. Jenny already went over this, so I won't belabor it anymore, but we are here waiting for the early action plan implementation to begin on February 26th. Can't believe tomorrow is February 1st. It will be here before we know it. We are basically 3 weeks away. And just a couple of links here for information for both the CV SALTS website as well as the Regional Board's CV SALTS link. And so that will be available. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Deborah Dunn with the Kings Water Alliance, and she will talk about what the Kings Water Alliance Priority 2 Basin looks like and what they are going to be doing for their Priority 2 area.
Thank you, Tess, and good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having me today. For those that took time out of your day to attend this, we appreciate it. I am Deborah Dunn, the Executive Officer for the Kings Water Alliance, and I will be discussing my management zone's Priority 2 submittals and outreach activities. We here at the Kings Water Alliance think of ourselves as a community resource. We are a nonprofit organization that is funded by nitrate dischargers. As previously discussed, that is irrigated ag, dairies and confined bovine, poultry, wastewater treatment facilities, food processors, wineries, packing houses, and other dischargers that fall under the nitrate control program. The Kings Water Alliance, if you look at the graphic on the right of the screen, includes portions of Fresno, Kings, and Tulare counties, excluding those public water systems such as the city of Fresno, the city of Clovis, city of Hanford, to name a few. Just a brief overview of our management zone, which does include Priority 1 and Priority 2 areas. We have approximately 700,000 acres of irrigated ag, 125 acres of dairy or bovine, 2,500 acres of poultry, and approximately 90 individual permittees, about 75 in our Priority 1 area and about 15 in our Priority 2 Tulare Lake Subbasin area. We are currently implementing programs that provide safe drinking water to nitrate-impacted residents, both on the short term and on the long term. Short-term solutions are currently being offered now in areas of Fresno and Tulare counties, and is going to be expanded into the Kings County, Tulare Lake Subbasin area, the area that is in pink on your map there, in February of 2025. KWA board consists of 7 board members, 3 irrigated agriculture, 2 dairy industry, 1 poultry, and 1 winery. Next slide, please. If you take a look at the graphics on the map, you're going to be seeing on the left-hand side of the screen the applications that the Kings Water Alliance and Priority 1 has received, and the applications and the number of bottled water recipients on the right-hand side of the screen. So the Kings Water Alliance will indeed leverage its vast experience from our Priority 1 areas, including over 3,100 well sampling applications. Those are those tan or brown dots on the graphic to the left, and over 1,200 samples collected, and over 700 bottled water recipients to date. Those are the 700, I'm sorry, those are the gray dots on the right side. As you can tell, it is spread throughout our subbasin. And we are looking forward to expanding into the Tulare Lake subbasin as well. Next slide, please. The Kingswater Alliance is a little bit unique, as we mentioned previously, in that we have a priority 1 and a priority 2 area. As shown in the map, excuse me, I apologize for the weak voice this morning, as something that must be going around in the air here. But the Kingswater Alliance on the red, you will see our priority 1 area of the Kings Subbasin, and on the bottom right-hand side, you will see the orange area of the priority 2. What's unique about the Kingswater Alliance is that we already included that priority 2 area in our original preliminary management zone proposal and early action plan for priority 1 that were submitted in March of 2021. For that reason, our submittal looks slightly different. We included an addendum to those preliminary management zone proposal and early action plans with updates that were focused on preliminary management zone overviews, Tulare Lake subbasin characterization, initial assessment of groundwater condition updates, and an early action plan addendum. These documents were made public. The early action plan was made public on November 12th, 2024, and the preliminary management zone proposal was made public for comments on November 25th, 2025. Next slide, please. Initial assessment of the groundwater conditions for nitrates can be found in the graphic to the right here. Our technical team utilized publicly available nitrate data to complete an analysis of nitrate impacted areas within our priority 2 Tulare Lake subbasin area. As a reminder, those areas that are in red and orange are those potentially impacted by nitrates. Those in yellow and green were less likely to be impacted by nitrates. However, just a reminder that we outreach to all rural residential areas in the management zone for our free well sampling services. And not only that, we remind folks to know that the only way to know for sure if your well has nitrate contamination is to get your rural residential well tested for nitrates. Of special note on the graphic is the gray hatched area. This area is de-designated for municipal and agricultural beneficial uses because of high groundwater salinity. The management zone believes that there are limited residents and domestic wells in this area, but the Kingswater Alliance will outreach to this area as part of our overall outreach efforts. Next slide, please. Here we have the groundwater condition for nitrates, broken down by domestic wells and potential population outside of public water systems. Through our various methods of outreach activities, including postcards, social media, webinars, meetings, community partnerships, food banks, we strive to get the word out to all residents about this rural drinking water sampling that we offer, as well as potentially free drinking water if your well is impacted. Our analysis estimates that just under 1,200 domestic drinking water wells are outside of a public water system boundary in this area, which potentially 15% of those wells are potentially impacted by nitrates. Again, our goal in our management zone is to test all rural residential wells within our management zone boundary. Next slide, please. We are currently locked in and ready to get our first postcard, as well as additional outreach methods out to the Tulare Lake subbasin starting in February of 2025, utilizing our vast experience that I mentioned for our priority 1 efforts. Our postcard is finalized, and we estimate that it will be hitting mailboxes on February 26, 2025 to kick off our free well sampling and bottled water services. The KWA will also be launching social media campaigns, community partnerships, press releases, and community engagement events to kick off our free well sampling and bottled water services. Next slide, please. I would like to now pass off the presentation to Nicole Bell with Kern Water Collaborative.
All right. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you to the water board members as well as staff for inviting me to present today. I am Nicole Bell, the Executive Director of the Kern Water Collaborative. We are a nonprofit public benefit corporation that formed in 2022 with the anticipation of the notice to comply coming shortly after the P1 notice to complies. So we've had a couple years to get everything in order, get our organization created, and build leadership and relationships in the area to help move our organization forward. Our mission is to maintain and improve the quality of life within Kern County's 3 groundwater basins, the West Side South, which is a priority 2, Hozo, which is a priority 2, and the Kern River, which is a non-prioritized area that we have included in our management zone, and the small portion of Kings County's Tulare Lake Basin, which Tess had identified, and I will show you on a map as well. We are by implementing programs that will help provide access to safe drinking water for our residents. That is our critical mission. And we have done that by engaging in activities with the goal of investigating, protecting, and enhancing the quality of groundwater drinking water supplies. We will do that over the coming years, working with our partners. And in the short term, we will be testing wells. Next slide, please. We will be testing wells and providing bottled water services to those that are eligible. The board is made up of 11 members. There are 6 irrigated agricultural seats, 2 oil and gas seats, which again is unique to Kern County. We have a food processor, dairy and bovine representative, a publicly owned treatment works, POTW representative as well. And I will note that of those 11 board members, actually 4 of them are water district managers or staff that have lead roles in multiple GSAs in Kern County. We have also entered into a formal MOU with the 20 GSAs in Kern County to ensure that our resources are being utilized to the best of our ability. We are sharing information, and we plan to move forward coordinating efforts with providing safe drinking water to those who need it. Next slide, please. This is our nitrate control program priority areas. The green areas are the priority 2. So again, West Side South, Kern Pozo, and the Tulare Lake Sliver that was not already included in the Kings Water Alliance in their priority 1 area. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Tess. Thank you. In order to understand, well, this is an overview. Tess, did you add all of my new slides? Well, we'll just continue.
Nope, didn't catch those.
Okay. So I guess I will highlight from my other slides that you guys don't see, so it's okay. I'll just talk about it. To understand where high nitrate occurred, we have identified areas affected by nitrate. We have developed maps showing recent nitrate levels, and then we have completed a preliminary domestic well assessment and population count, which will be seen in our submitted documents, the PMZP, EAP, and that I've highlighted for you here today. So this is an overview of our 3 priority 2 areas. You will notice the ambient nitrate conditions, and as Deborah had pointed out, the kind of orange and red areas are the areas of concern. In the Pozo and the west side south. And then you'll notice that our sliver in the Tulare Lake Basin up top doesn't have any color coding. And that is because our research has shown that there are no domestic wells in that sliver. And really, there's no population there as well. However, we will still be reaching out to kind of that surrounding area to ensure that they are aware of the program in case there is something in the area that we had not been able to identify through publicly available data. Next slide, please. So getting into the breakdown of Kern County West Side South, these maps will be similar to what Deborah and Perry will show you. We have the same contractor, you can see, but it just gives you an overview of our ambient nitrate conditions, specifically to the West Side South. Next slide, please. And then this breaks down the potential domestic wells outside of the public water system boundaries. You will see of all categories, including the unknown, we anticipate there are 220 wells with a total of 136 in this area that potentially have issues. And that 136 number for me comes from the anything 7.5 and above. And then we are also including our unknown, that group 6, because they're unknown, we don't know. So the only way to find out is to have well testing in those wells. And we will be encouraging that. Although the concerns are the orange, red, and unknown, we, as Deborah had said, will be outreaching to all households in our boundary areas to ensure that they do have ability to test their water, which again is the only way we will really know if there are problems that need to be addressed. The next slide covers the Pozo area. Again, just highlighting on the color coding, orange and red being of most concern. Next slide, please. And the breakdown of the domestic well count outside public water system boundaries that we will be focused on. Total of 352, anticipated that 203 of those may have issues with nitrate. So again, we will focus on our outreach to everybody. Haven't decided this yet, but I'm anticipating that we may do additional outreach specifically to the areas of concern, but we're still kind of working through that process. But outreach for now will be going to everybody, and we may do more just once we kind of get into things. We'll know better. Next slide. Community outreach participation. I will note that not only do we coordinate with communities, but the P1s and P2s are closely coordinated. P2s, and I, as Tess mentioned, Kern Water Collaborative is the only new entity that does not have experience with priority ones on the ground experience. I have been involved with the meetings and discussions for the nitrate control program since its inception, and had participated in all of the P1 meetings as well. So there's a breadth of information and success stories and even things that didn't work in P1 that have been shared with myself. Last week, we actually had a meeting of the P1 and P2 management zone leaders and our outreach public relations staff to compare notes, try to improve the processes and approaches across the board for the entire Central Valley for our P1 and P2 management zones. So we do appreciate that coordination and the efforts that the P1s have shared with us as well. Just some examples of our outreach. Next slide, Tess. Kern Water Collaborative flyers. We have posted and provided multiple flyers. All of our outreach, I will note, is done in both English and Spanish. So this is just an example of that. Next slide, Tess. We do have a YouTube channel. So of the 8 outreach meetings that we had this year, we had dual English and Spanish Zoom meetings as well as in-person meetings. All are recorded and posted to our website. Interpretation and translation is available at all of our meetings. So you will see that all of our postings, again, are recorded and presentations presented in English and Spanish across the board. Next slide, please. Examples of our email and mail campaigns. Again, everything done in English and Spanish. One thing I will mention that anytime we are holding workshops, we do have kind of save the dates, multiple emails and postings leading up to those meetings. And by postings, I mean all of our social media. We do all of that in English and Spanish as well. And then after our actual meetings, we go back out and provide the meeting materials to everyone on our outreach list. So we will provide them with the information from the meeting and links to the videos and back to our website and our YouTube channel as well. Next slide, please. Again, just examples of postcards, save the dates, reminders about our meetings that we put on Facebook or other social medias and send out in emails. Across the board, we have one of our guidelines is to make sure that all of our information is being presented in all of our outlets. So everything matches on all of our social media, our website, and our YouTube channel. Next slide, please. We also do Instagram stories and not YouTube, excuse me, Facebook Lives when we're out at events. So this is just an example of, this was actually I think one of the first management zones to do this, but we did a dual webinar, which the Zoom webinar was in English and Spanish coming from our live broadcast in English and Spanish. So it was kind of a 3-part, really a 6-part, because you've got English and Spanish going on in all of those. But it was quite interesting. I think we learned a lot on how to improve. And just for the regional board's benefit, I will tell you that there are technical difficulties at everything. So we also had technical difficulties at this event, but it still turned out very successful. So thank you for that. The next slide, Tess. This is actually, so everything you've seen up to now is what we had done for outreach in order to get the public to participate and help us develop our PMZP EAP. This slide is actually this month. We are already out in the communities working to promote the program, well testing and water bottle delivery. And in Buttonwillow, we held an event and were sponsored by the Buttonwillow Library for a storytelling event where an author came and read stories to, it was kind of geared at school age folks, but of course, anytime you're geared to school age folks, that brings the families out and is a good way for participation and knowledge. So we really appreciated that. And then I actually presented at a big technical meeting that was happening here in Kern this week. Again, just to be a broad approach as possible in order to get the information out to the public. And a lot of times that's by word of mouth. So going to kind of maybe the off the beaten track type of events we're finding is also very important and helpful. One slide that Tess does not have, using my old slide deck here, is just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that for our well testing and bottled water tracking, we have teamed up with what Kings, Kauai, and Thule had used for their online platform. They were gracious enough to share that with us. So we will be using an online platform for the application process. But of course, assistance will also be made available by phone and having hard copy hard copy applications if they're interested in that. So we will do multiple different approaches in order to make sure that people have the ease in applying for well testing. With that, I believe there we go. So thank you for your time. And I'm available for questions, but I believe we're holding those until after Perry or maybe even later. But thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Perry, you're up next, and if you can just let Jenny know if there was another person that was going to talk, we can make them a co-host so they can take themselves off mute.
Yeah, they won't be speaking after all.
Okay, that's fine. And just so you know, like we're running about 6 minutes behind, so you do not need to end at 10:30. You can end closer to like 10:36. We're just a few minutes behind schedule. Thanks.
Thank you. Sounds good. Okay. I have my camera on? Do you have me on a speaker?
Correct. We can hear you.
Okay. I was waiting for my camera to show up, if that's possible. Maybe it's just my screen. Well, thank you for the time today. Welcome, board members Kadara and Reader. Ms. Kadara, we've had many conversations over the years about the nitrate control program. I hope you're encouraged by what you hear. And Ms. Reader, I look forward to working with you as well on these programs. So Perry Clausen, Executive Director of Valley Water Collaborative. We are a nonprofit organization that was formed specifically to represent committees when the nitrate control program was adopted, similar to the previous speakers in the other management zones. We have an administrative office in Modesto, and we are expanding our organization. I'll talk about in a minute. We have a very similar mission to the other management zones. In fact, much of what we do, and before I go into this, I want to say that Deborah and Nicole's presentations are a big ditto from Valley Water as well. We collaborate a lot and do pretty much the same thing in all of our outreach programs. I'm not going to go through ours as Nicole and Deborah did a great job covering what we are all doing. Very small nuances that are different, but generally we're taking the same approach both with mailings and the internet and other social media outlets to get the message out about our very similar and in many ways identical programs. So our mission is to implement these programs and provide access to safe drinking water for all the residents whose wells are impacted. And then on the other side, on the committee discharger side, we're also collaborating to protect and enhance the water quality in our basins, so that on the long term, as our CV salts and nitrate control program goals include working on these discharges of nitrate to groundwater. Next slide. So we started out, as I mentioned, in Modesto Turlock basins. We are now expanding into the basins you see listed here, north to south, Yolo, eastern San Joaquin, Delta Mendota, Merced, and Madera. Next slide. You've seen already the mapping that our consultants have been doing. And these maps are to give us an idea for the potential impact of groundwater in our areas. And again, as mentioned by both of my predecessors here, we outreach to the entire basin. A lot of our efforts, most of our efforts are hopefully reaching these audiences throughout the entire basins. And the data that we are using is helping us focus some of our efforts, but just to emphasize that there are issues in these basins that need to be addressed. And the data that you see is collected from 2010 and all of our PMZPs from 2010 to the present. So we have a really good idea of where our issues are. Some of that includes depth to groundwater, or where the depth is, where the nitrate contamination exists. And then we develop these maps that are usable in each of the basins. And I'll go over those in a minute. Okay, next slide. And an aggregation of our 5 basins shows the priority 2 basins show you that there's a total of approximately 2,400 wells that are in the 7.5 to 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate in these wells. So we use that as a general idea and kind of a metric to show, based on our applications in bottled water, how many individuals, residences we may be working with in coming years. So just in comparison, Modesto Turlock Basin had about 3,500 wells in our area. I'm sorry for that. Next slide. So our board of directors manages our overall organization. They were established with our priority 1 basins. We have 12 board members representing the sectors of the permit holders in our area. You can see the numbers listed here, from irrigated ag, municipalities, cities, food processor, winery, other, dairy, and poultry. And for our priority 2 basins, we have advisory committees formed in each of these basins with these industry sectors represented if they exist in those basins. The only exception is poultry. They're in all four of the 5 basins, and but not in the YOLO basin. So these basins advisory committees have industry sector representation. And coincidentally, our existing board of directors several of them operate in several of the other priority 2 basins. So we are adding 1 or 2 more board members from these new basins here in the very near future, based on the need and the request of these various basins. Okay, next slide. So our structure of our organization with the advisory committees is enabling us to take advantage of local knowledge. So each of the basins I mentioned has these advisory committees. They provide input, localized input on outreach tactics. They give us some input on our budgeting and our planning that we do for the implementation of the program. And in particular, that's very helpful is they help us engage with these basin-specific community organizations, which vary, of course, throughout our region. Some are, as you're going to hear from later in this workshop today, cover the entire Central Valley, but there are a lot of city-based or very locally based entities that these members of our advisory committees are able to connect us with. Okay, next slide. So you might wonder, how are we going to handle all these new basins as an organization? Well, we look at our last 4 years, how we've managed our applications, which number about 1,500. We have about 400 in the priority 1 basin, about 1,500 applications, about 400 residents receiving bottled water, and about 700 wells that have tested. So we know what the workload is. We understand where the efforts need to be made to manage this many applications. So the titles that you see in red have been added and are being added to our staffing where we see there's a need for additional staff to handle these various functions. In particular, our outreach manager. I've been working on most of that in the last 4 years, but now we have a person specifically whose job is to facilitate and perform the things that, in fact, as I mentioned, Deborah and Nicole mentioned in their programs. There's a long list of things that we have learned that are tactics that we have learned are appropriate for reaching out to the communities. We also have a communications coordinator that we added, whose job will now be solely to answer the phone, work with the applicants, work with the lab, and the communication with the residents whose wells have been tested. So that person now is going to be completely dedicated to those activities. And then in the lower right, you'll see we're adding outreach associates that will be regionally based. We'll have one that covers the YOLO Eastern San Joaquin basins, and then another that handles the central outreach. Will continue, of course, in the priority 1 basin, Modesto Turlock, as well as at northern Delta Mendota. And then we are spreading into the southern part of the valley into the Merced and Madera basins, as well as a southern tip of the Southern Delta Mendota Basin. So we're anticipating that this staffing level will be adequate, but we are very flexible. If we see the need, we are definitely going to be adding more staff to help in fulfilling our early action plan responsibilities. Okay, next slide. So we are also expanding our data tracking mapping tool that we developed and modified from a drinking water management program for a city, one of the cities in our basin. And that gives us very accurate information related to the location of our applicants, as you see on the left, and then where our bottled water recipients are on the right. And coincidentally, we've all talked about the mapping that we've done in our preliminary management zone proposals, and you'll see that even though we have some deliveries that are going on in the yellow and green areas, it is pretty much matching the mapping of the preliminary management zone proposal that shows that we're fairly accurate in these assessments that we've been doing. Okay, the next slide. So I'm going to just go through quickly all the 5 basins that we've added. I'll start with yellow. You can see on the northern part of the top of the map there, that's mostly Yolo County. Next slide. This is the areas where there's high nitrates, Interstate 5 over on the right, and Central Sacramento on the upper right, the American Basin on the right, and in the center, lower right-hand side, you can see Interstate 80 snaking off to the bottom of the map. So are the areas in the center of the basin and the westerly part, and some around the West Sac area are showing high nitrates. Again, we'll be reaching out to the entire basin with our outreach. So next slide. And then again, similar data to what you saw earlier. And the first column gives you the well counts. So there's a potential of about 336 wells of all levels, but the 85 and 68 wells you see listed there in the middle are the ones that are likely to be above the drinking water standard. And then the population estimates based on the census that shows on the far lower right-hand corner, that's a little over 7,000 residences. Okay, next slide. Next is the Eastern San Joaquin Basin. The city that's most recognizable is Stockton. And this is the area to the west of or to the east of the Delta. The Delta proper is not included in this basin. And then the Stanislaus River on the south. Next slide. Again, the mapping, the round dots, as I mentioned earlier, are the wells where the data was gathered to develop these maps. You see in the lower part of the basin is the higher nitrates across to following the Interstate 5 route on the far left. Next map, next slide. And here we have about 2,400 wells, 2,500 total wells, with 385 plus the 822 wells that potentially could be impacted by nitrate. Total population a little under 65,000 in those residences. Okay, next slide. Delta Mendota Basin is delineated pretty much by Interstate 5 on the west side and the San Joaquin River on the east side of the basin, stretching down past Los Banos and extending a little bit into the Fresno County area. Next slide. Again, the map shows where the high nitrates are. They tend to be follow the Highway 33 corridor and then extending down to the Los Banos area, and a few wells that you can see on the lower right. And the reason there's a circle is that that's the designation that's used to inference the contouring that's developed from those data points. Okay, the next one. And then this again, similar data, about 817 wells. That domestic wells at 142 plus 259 are those that could be impacted. Then about 15,000 residents may that occupy those or use those 800 wells. So the next slide. Then we have the Merced Basin. The city of Merced is centrally located. It's south of the Our rivers here, the Merced River down to the bottom of that basin. So the next slide. The central part of the basin has the most high nitrate area, and then on the eastern side, there's a few spots. Next slide. And then the 869 total potential wells, domestic wells, 138 plus 382 are the ones that could be impacted, about 33,000 residences. Next slide. And then finally, the Madera Basin at the far south, and the A is on the, it didn't make the cut there, so it's on the lower left, but it is Madera, and it's from the San Joaquin River north to the Chowchilla River. And the white area you see is the Chowchilla Priority 1 Basin. Okay, next slide. And here you see just a very small number of wells actually in the Madera Basin. The next slide, and this data will show that there's about 970 domestic wells, but very few of those, 55 and 20 plus 23, are located in the orange and red areas, population of about 27,000 that use private wells in that basin. So the next slide. So Valley Water was able to get a safer grant to help expand our sampling of contaminants in our well testing program. We started in 2022 with this grant, and when we wrote the contract with the State Water Board, we were able to write the language in anticipation of adding priority 2 basins. So we are going to be able to apply immediately the safer grant and the expanded contaminant testing in our well testing program. And next slide. So this is an example of what we sample for in the Modesto Turlock basins. So what the SAFER program enables us to do, asks us to do, is to investigate what other groundwater contaminants are in each of these basins. So this list may vary. We're working on this right now, but this list may vary and for what we analyze for. And these are the results you see that are above the MCL. I've shared this in other regional board meetings. You can see the percentages of the wells in the Modesto Turlock basins where these contaminants are showing exceedances. So again, we'll likely be adding to this list or possibly subtracting if some of these contaminants aren't found in these areas. And then to treat some of these, we're using point of entry, in particular the 123 TCP, where it's a carbon treatment for the point of entry into the house, or point of use under the sink where these systems are installed to treat for these other contaminants. Okay, next slide. So just briefly show you, just emphasize the point that the materials that we develop in the priority 1 basins have been road tested, if you will. We in particular, and all the groups, have really simplified our message. Frankly, when we started, we thought we had to explain the nitrate control program, and we had some pretty busy postcards, at least in Valley Water. Now we've really boiled it down to the free well testing, apply online or call us, and again, both English and Spanish, so that we reach our target audiences and get the information out in a simple form. We are, as others are, ready to have our postcards hit the mailboxes on February 26th, on or before. And we're going to continue all the outreach activities that were mentioned by Nicole and Deborah. And we have reservations, and we're planning to be at various venues throughout our regions to get the word out and hopefully trigger the applications to the program in the early stages. So then, next slide. So I want to take a minute to go over the lessons learned. So we, as was mentioned, we at the management zones share stories, talk about what we do once a month at the least. And we had a meeting last week, as Nicole mentioned, where we all got together with our various outreach staff and such, and just brainstormed on what we could do, but also trying to understand, are we the only ones that are having a hard time establishing our organization? So, and that's my first point. that we all realize it takes time for a brand new organization to be recognized, to be trusted. Even though we do rely on our partners a lot, it still comes down to somebody hearing a message about something free, which we have learned also is a very hard sell. I had a friend not long ago, last week, went into Home Depot and somebody was offering free well testing. And the hitch was the person asked, so what's the follow-up? Well, we have a water treatment system we'd like to sell you. And we hear that quite commonly from people of, okay, it's free, but what's the hitch or what's the strings attached? And we, of course, tell them there are no strings attached. So it is a hard sell. It's not something that we linger on, but we are doing all we can to take away any perception that this is either short-term or something that there's a sale involved. And then, unfortunately, with everything that's going on in water, the groundwater sustainability authorities are very well known in all of these areas, getting to be well known. And when they hear that this is a government related program, there are some that have said to us, so are you going to take my water away, shut down my well, if it has nitrates, which of course we don't. We have no intention of doing that, but there is some that distrust any program that has relationship to state or county government. So the next slide. But we have found our most responsive way, the best way to get people to respond to our program is word of mouth, especially after now we have hundreds of people receiving water. They talk to their neighbor, they talk to relatives, friends at work, and let folks know that, yes, we're legitimate. And we do, when people apply to our programs, we have a survey at the end that asks them, how did you hear about the program? And by far, word of mouth is the highest, after 3 years, the highest response. And then the most effective outreach tool itself is our postcards. We all postcard mail a lot to our address list. And we hear about that from some of them. Why do you keep sending me a postcard? But we want to make sure people see this message in their mailbox and in the mail that they receive. And there's also a trend of people saying, well, I got your postcard, I saw you at the farmer's market, talked to a friend, so I think I'm going to apply to your program. So it does take, with a lot of people, a multiple program exposure before they do finally apply. And then Valley Water, and I believe another of the management zones, is starting to offer cash incentives to our water recipients, that if they have a person that includes their name on the application, we will, once the sample is taken, we will give that recipient a $50 check for referring that person to our program. So, and it's working fairly well. Not as well as we thought it would, but again, we're trying all these different approaches to try to get folks to apply to the program. Next slide. And then the other things that we've learned is you got to have simple language. The wording, the postcards, the literature, it doesn't help you to have more words than less. What we've also been using is a software that you can run your materials through, and it's generally about a 5th grade reading level, both in English and Spanish, that seems to be the most effective. And one thing we learned early is don't use scare tactics, really more on education and empowerment and giving people this sense that, the question in their mind, what's in my well? Many of them have not sampled their wells before, but we try to use instead, well, understand what's in your well and act from that. And you have a program here that can help you get clean drinking water for free, and we try to avoid the scare tactics of the contamination that could be there in their area. We let them know, of course, but the main thing is to get them curious, what is in my well, and how to find out what is in the well. So the next slide, coming right up to the end, and then the outreach events, just I'll go through these quickly, as we offer giveaways, little trinkets and bling and such at our events. Some of the management zones have used children type child-focused programs, incentives to get the kids to come. That brings their parents. Also, of course, having food available. And we're always looking for new communication tools. We have the new internet sort of tools, but really the one-on-one and in-person are the most effective. And then we, as mentioned several times, we all collaborated within the management zones to share our ideas, lessons learned. And we are also co-sponsoring events with local community organizations. We invite them to the ones we put on, and vice versa. They invite us to theirs, and we get good exposure in that way. And they help us promote our program to their audiences. So each organization, of course, has their membership, so we promote to them as well. So I think that is my last. Oh, one more slide. Oh, I'm at the end. So we use all the latest technology, QR codes, readability software, and also I might just mention quickly, when we go to our meetings, similar to Nicole, we broadcast on Zoom. We have a translator, and then we have a tablet in the meeting that's on that Zoom room that the people can put a headset on and hear simultaneous translation of the meeting. So that's been working out pretty well for us. So Meredith, I made it right to 36. Thank you.
Perfect, Perry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, great. So we are going to take a break at this point, and when we come back, we will have the environmental justice panel, and then we will move into public comment and discussion. So I think we're running about 5 minutes behind. If we can come back at 10:45 from the break, that would be great. Sound good, everyone? Okay, great.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. So 10:45.
All right. See you all then. Hey, Meredith, can you see the environmental justice panel slides?
I can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And it is 10:45, so I think we will get going.
Wonderful. Jennifer Clary, are you returned from your break?
I am, thank you very much. And I just wanted to make sure that my colleagues had turned on their cameras if they're able to, so that we're all visible when we give our presentations. Thanks. Okay, so let's get started. I know we just have a little bit of time. We're here to give you our perspective on the current state of planning, and my name is Jennifer Clary. I'm the California Director of Clean Water Action, and you've heard me speak on this subject many times, but miracle of miracles, I've got 3 new people who want to engage in CV salts, and I'm kind of surprised, and I look forward to, and I'm sure we all look forward to their presentation. Next slide, please.
Oh, hold on just a sec. Okay, there we go.
So our speakers today are myself, Dr. Natalie Escobedo Garcia with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, Professor Iris Stewart Fry from Santa Clara University, and Angela Islas with Central California Environmental Justice Network. Next slide. So what we're going to do today is just a little overview of our perception of the program, some thoughts about process to date, a review of data gaps in the current program, example of a community impacted community, and then sort of next steps and recommendations. Next slide, please. And so just to say, I've been working on this for quite some time and was pretty heavily involved in the implementation of the Priority 1 Basin environmental action plans, I should say, in critiquing the Priority 1 environmental action plans and looking at how these have evolved. I want to say how much I appreciate the extensive amount of outreach that has been done. It's clear to me that everyone's working really hard to reach potentially impacted well owners. And I think we've reached that. I think in nearly 4 years, we still haven't reached the 30% mark in potentially impacted wells receiving aid. And that's something that I think about a lot when I think about particularly the long-term implementation of the plan and what it's going to take to reach the water quality objectives and start bringing down the nitrate concentration. And then the other thing is how essential coordination with SAFER is. And one of the frustrating parts of the Priority 1 Basin process was how long it took to establish coordination agreements with each of the basins and the fact that they were done sequentially. So the first one was done with Valley Water Collaborative in November of 2022, which was, 20 months after the plan went into place. And I think it's really important as we're doing outreach that we're providing people with a broad range of assistance. So now, if you go to the next slide, I'll turn it over to Natalie.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Natalie. I'm a water policy coordinator with Leadership Council. While I am newer to engaging on CV SALT implementation, you're likely very familiar with my colleague, Michael Claiborne, our directing attorney, who has engaged in this process for at least the last 8 years. Regarding how public engagement was handled for the preliminary management zone implementation plan, we do have concerns about how the board proceeded with public engagement. While we always appreciate any and all opportunities for public engagement, we did feel that this public comment period was very short. It only became available on December 30th. And as many of y'all know, there were quite a few agencies and staff and organizations that were on holiday during the start of the public comment period. Along with that, the notice that was put out, it was a little unclear the full purpose of this workshop. And the notice, it mentioned that public comment would be discussed during the workshop, but public comment was only due at the start of this week, giving board staff a very short period to review comments and be able to address feedback that was given. We believe moving forward, the board should provide more adequate time for review We recommend at least 45 days for public comment. And then we do also recommend that workshops get hosted before the close of the public comment period as opposed to after. We would have definitely appreciated a chance to ask any questions that could have been addressed prior to comments being submitted. And then I'd also just like to note that these are process concerns that we have highlighted in the past. Next slide, please. Along with that, we are committed to making sure that this program is implemented successfully. We have some further recommendations on how the board should move forward with the MSIPs process. We do ask that a comment period get established on submitted MSIPs, and then allowing for amendments to be made to those MSIPs after feedback is incorporated. We've seen this be successful in other plan review processes, like for example, as the way plans have been reviewed in the sustainable groundwater management context. We also ask that these MSIPs include immediate actions for long-term solutions and for those receiving interim water supplies. Again, these are comments that we have made in the past and will continue to elevate throughout this process. And with that, I can pass it on to, I believe, Professor Iris.
Yes, thank you. My name is Iris Stewart-Fry. I am a professor of environmental science at Santa Clara University and also the co-coordinator of the Environmental Justice and the Common Good Initiative. And we have also, together with CRLA, provided input in the public comment process in the past. Throughout this process. And I want to express that we are, similarly concerned about the issues that my, two previous co-panelists have been raising about, the process, delays in the process, the involvement and the level of outreach, although we do we recognize the efforts that have been made and also the improvements that have been made, and some of the issues that we're raising here are are also in line with what we've been pointing out with priority 1 basins. And one of the points that we want to make is that we need to learn we need to take what we've learned from the priority 1 basins and hopefully transfer that to the priority 2 basins to speed up some of the processes. One of the things that we've continued to point out is the scarcity in full on in the nitrate data. We do appreciate that you're providing these interpolation maps that go from where well location measurements are and then interpolate, to areas around that. However, as you also mentioned yourself, much of these wells were only tested like once or, maybe 2 or 3 times within like a 15 or sometimes even longer time period. So there's very little that we know about whether nitrate concentration since 2010 or 12 or 15 has gotten better or worse in those cases. And based on that, you're making these interpolated maps that distinguish zones as either green or orange or red, and that we need more up-to-date well samples and more frequent well samples to actually figure out what is going on right now, but also whether the process or whether the CV SALTS program ultimately can be successful. So I have here just like some preliminary maps based on the public available gamma data. And you can see that the purple points is where we have at least 1 measurement, but that measurement can be 15 years ago. So we need more recent measurements. And if the collaboratives are reaching out it would be important to get these, updated well measurements into, the public availability, sooner rather than later, so that we can, we can come up with interpolated maps that are more up to date. What we also have on here are maps of, in the red dots are the locations of CAFOs, which often have waste lagoons and are, one of the primary sources for nitrates along with agriculture. And so one of the things that we can see when we put these next to each other is that there are locations where we have CAFOs, but not even nitrate measurement, not even those 1 or 2 nitrate measurements, right? And we don't have much information about sources or source locations or nitrate entry at all. And especially how they also overlap with historically marginalized communities, which we have in like a slightly hatched areas, on these maps. If we can move to so these are 2 areas where we have priority 1 basins, the Eastern San Joaquin, and then the Delta Mendota, Merced, and Madera basins. If we can move on 1 slide. So this one is Kern and Thule, and if we're looking at the northern area, the northernmost part of that, we see a lot of red, which are the CAFOs, and for example, very few purple dots, which would be very few actually nitrate tests. And that would be one of the prime concerns in that sense that we're talking about. 1 more slide, please. So I think I covered some of these. So we have insufficient monitoring in both space and time, and you see that on your own maps where you just have like small circles around your wells, and then they're either red or green. But you don't have any indication of how old these measurements are or how this might be changing through time, because there are just not enough measurements. We do appreciate the difficulty of obtaining well tests. From some of the outreach that CLA has done, we've also learned that people might not be the owners of the property they live on or the wells, and especially in the current climate, may have particularly strong hesitations to be asking for well tests. Maybe the landowner or the landlord is not in agreement with that. So might there be other ways to be installing some monitoring wells, where we have areas of concern. And let's see what else that I haven't mentioned on my list here. So there's been some ineffectiveness to move the process forward in a time effective way. So we really encourage the collaboratives to place emphasis on that. I'm glad to hear that there are plans for the point of view systems. That's going to be very helpful, and the hopefully faster and better integration with a safer program. And yeah, and then I think I mentioned that at the beginning, but just want to emphasize that in order to assess how effective CV salts was at the end or will be at the end, we need also good baseline data. So really encourage you to do more in that respect and make it public sooner. Thank you. And with that, I want to pass it on to, let's see who was next.
Angela.
Angela, yes, sorry.
Cyrus. Good morning, everyone. My name is Angela Islas. I'm a water projects coordinator with Central California Environmental Justice Network, CCJN for short. And I am providing this one simple slide with a lot of context and narrative around and on the ground example of community needs and concerns within the Priority 1 basin that can be just kind of applied to in the Priority 2 process to just consider some of these sort of matters that can support a lot of the disadvantaged communities in the Priority 2 zones. And so what I'm going to be pretty much presenting is on a community that our organization is currently supporting under many of our programs. And that is the community of Perry Colony. This is just a screenshot of just where they are located. And so they are about 30 minutes south of Fresno off the 41. And they're a couple of miles to the west of the 41. And they are near Raisin City. This community is primarily a domestic well community. And this particular area has about, I want to say, 40 property owners that are fully dependent of groundwater. And the percentage of this community that is currently receiving hauled water because there are about 7 wells that have currently went dry in the last year and a half. That's about 15% of the residents are receiving hauled water services through our nonprofit partners, self-help enterprises, and about 10% of those wells that are in this community are currently receiving bottled water services through the Kings Water Alliance. So there is a pretty big mixture here with this domestic well community that not only are impacted with dry well, but also they are impacted by contaminants. But in particular, I did want to just highlight that recently there were some water sampling done for a few of these wells that are currently still receiving water. And I did want to mention that not only some of the wells, which are about 5, have about a good amount of nitrates that are exceeding over the MCL, but there are also other wells that have other contaminants of concern that were identified. And a few of those is uranium and 1,2,3-TCP. So this community not only is being impacted by nitrates, but they are also being impacted by other contaminants of concern that are a major vulnerability to the public health of many of these residents. And so I did want to just kind of mention that this community was in a process of receiving funding through a work plan under the SAFER program. They were considered to look into a feasibility study to determine potential consolidation with Raisin City, hence why in the map you can kind of see that Raisin City is a little bit just like southwest of the community. And that didn't actually work out in its way. Unfortunately, we all understand right now that there is a state budget constraint and funding is limited. And so this community was not selected this year. But they were not selected this year to receive funding to look into a feasibility study to determine consolidation with Raisin City. So this community will still be depending on interim solutions. So that is that they will be continuing to receive hauled water services through self-help. And with, just the availability of Kings Water Alliance continuing to provide bottled water services through their nitrate control program, a lot of those wells that are still impacted by nitrates will still be continuing to depend on that bottled water service. So I think the overall umbrella here is that from our advocacy and outreach with this community for the last year and a half to really try to help educate them and help them understand sort of the circumstances that they are facing. These were kind of the 2 top community concerns that we have heard, especially from those that are actually impacted by contamination or dry wells, is that there are just a lot of multiple entities that have been coming in to this community to really just kind of educate them on 2 different topics, obviously drought and obviously contamination. And so the issue here is that there's multiple entities, but there is no long-term solution that has been identified for this community to feel that they can foresee permanent water in their community. And so with what happened recently with the decision for this community to not receive at this time state funding to look into that, that's probably another year or two that this community would need to wait to receive a feasibility study or even the potential like identification that they can consolidate. So again, consolidation for many of us that we've understood it, this is a very multi-year process for a community to really see that they can connect to a nearby water system. And so here's this community needing to wait again for a possible long-term solution down the road if that's identified. And so coordination in this discussion, as Jennifer mentioned earlier in the presentation, that is very, very key and important. And this community does want to see where coordination can be visible to identify that long-term solution. And even especially for contamination, I think that that's what we're really trying to recommend here is that even beyond the SAFER program, we want to see what coordination can look like even on the SIGMA side with groundwater sustainability agencies that also have certain criteria that they need to meet to support long-term sustainability for our groundwater resource. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Jennifer to just do the closing remarks.
Thanks. Next slide, please.
And Jennifer, you have until about 11:15 because we're a little off, so you can take some additional time than I think what you had planned. Thanks.
Well, I was actually counting till 11:15, so thanks, but I'll try to speak more slowly because I know I talk too fast. So I think just to kind of wind things up and identify our recommendations, CV SALTS is really interesting at this stage because we have the early action plan where we're all working together to make sure we reach as many people and provide as much safe drinking water as possible. And on the other hand, we have the management zone implementation plans where we're trying to get you to speed up compliance with the nitrate discharge limits. And so I understand there's a little bit of a pressure there, but just a couple things we're looking at. One is I appreciate what everyone said about outreach and communication to reach people to provide safe drinking water. But once more, these are also people that you should be consulting about long-term solutions. Like, what is it? They're going to be the recipients of a long-term solution. How are you engaging them in that discussion and having realistic conversations about funding and options? And I really think that's a great idea. For monitoring, it'd be, as Iris said, we really need to figure out how we better monitor because we know that nitrate contamination is increasing over time until we get a handle on discharges. So how are we monitoring the expansion of potentially nitrate contaminated areas? I appreciate that the outreach and engagement for replacement water covers areas outside the identified areas. But when it comes to long-term solutions, you're still focusing on your focus areas. So I think we do need to think about what our process is for reevaluating what our boundaries are. And for transparency, I think I really appreciate that I heard both from Perry on the Valley Water Collaborative, and I was on the listserv for the Kern Water Collaborative, where we have some capacity. And I think that you guys did a pretty good job of notifying people about the planning effort ahead of time. But, what I see now is there's probably going to be radio silence about the development of the MZIP. This is what happened with the Priority 1 basin. So I would just say, be great if we could talk about what you guys are planning, especially in terms of long-term solutions while you're preparing the plans and not just have to wait and respond when the plans are submitted. And it would also be helpful if we had a clearer process for commenting on these plans, both during their development and when they're submitted for approval. by the executive officer. Oh, and also on metrics, I think the dashboard is really wonderful, the CV SALTS dashboard, but I can't find access to it anywhere but in the agendas for the monthly CV SALTS meetings. Can we make that dashboard available on the websites for the Valley Water, Kern Water, and Kings Water collaboratives? It just seems like a good tool. And one thing I'd appreciate adding to that, maybe it's on the dashboard, maybe it's a separate metric, is what are we doing with the people who come to us who have nitrate above 7.5, but below the drinking water standard? I know they have the option of being retested. How many people are taking advantage of that option? And what are we finding when we retest? So that can tell us a lot of things, like whether people are willing to be retested on a regular basis, what might be happening in that particular area, like is nitrate going up, going down, staying the same over a long period of time? It tells us something. So we'd really like to see a little more information. And I think that that is all we have. And guess what? I put you guys right back on schedule. Thank you very much for your time and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, panel members. I really appreciate you working with such a short time frame to get us both written comments and participate in this workshop. So really appreciate you participating in this panel. I did just want to address, unfortunately, the way the basin plan was written. The timelines just happened to line up with the holidays and only give us a 60-day review period for the early action plans to be reviewed, and they get implemented if we don't have any revisions to them. So we just wanted to make sure we got a thorough review beforehand, which has proved to be very tricky. I think we've learned a lesson in the future on that. But at the same time, we want early water, replacement water to be getting to people as soon as possible. So that was the reasoning for the short time frame. So thank you for your comments. I just wanted to let you know what was driving our short review period for right now, at least. So now we have gotten to our public comment period section. I am going to bring back up my slides if you'll just give me a second for that. Can everyone see the slide okay? Okay, great, thank you. All right. Again, if you are joining through the Zoom meeting, simultaneous language interpretation in Spanish is available. Right after this slide, I'll put that in the chat as well, the instructions. Please select the language interpretation channel by clicking on the interpretation feature with the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. You're going to want to select Spanish and select mute original audio. It is important that you select Spanish and click finish so that you can hear the presentation and comments. At this time, we would like to open it up to public comment. We will also be doing a question and answer portion and open discussion after the public comments portion. For today's workshop, board members and board staff are present on the Zoom call to hear comments and feedback to consider for the PMZP and EAP reviews, as well as the next steps in the implementation process. If you would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. For those on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. We will call your name in the order that they are received and then ask you to unmute. Please do not use the chat feature for questions or comments. Please only use it for issues with technical difficulties. A quick reminder, we would like to give about 3 minutes per comment. So please note that while you are speaking and be succinct in your comments. So we will now move into the public comment section of the workshop. A few instructions before we start. Sorry if this is a little repetitive, I just want to make sure we get everybody situated. Please use the raise hand feature if you have a question or comment. Please do not use the chat feature for questions or comments. Please only use it for issues with technical difficulties. All comments will be taken in the order the raised hands are received. And when asking your question, please state your name and please keep your comments brief. And now we will open up for public comments and questions.
I saw one hand go up and then go down, so. Go ahead, Letitia. Can you take yourself?
Yeah, no, thank you for your patience. My name is Leticia. I'm with California Rural Legal Assistance, and I'm very grateful for all of these presentations and this information. I want to echo what other organizations have been saying, because we've also been working with the King's Water Alliance to improve similar things such as outreach and working with the environmental justice and public good on some data comments. We do strongly believe there is a significant opportunity to improve outreach strategies. I think all of them are great as they are, but it could be better. And we encourage the water board to have the management zones implement more creative strategies. I think, you know, and it seems like so long ago now, but the pandemic really, I think, pushed us to be more creative in doing strategies. And so sort of the things that I'm thinking about are, you know, partnering with like local businesses and like radio stations. And I know that we usually refer to Radio Bilingüe, but there's a lot of other radio stations that people tune into, and just really getting to know the folks in your regions and what they listen to and the things that they do. And also, you know, creating maybe like platforms where people have more, feel more comfortable going on. So I know like WhatsApp is really big in a lot of communities, and creating channels and people just jump in there and talk to. The Mexican consulate has also been using that recently. But in addition to all of that, we'd also like to know more about what the management zones are doing, or even the water board on sharing information on what used to be SB 2454 now in the health and safety code. But that aside, we do recommend that the management zones or the water board target education to landlords so that they can understand their obligations to participating in the well testing program. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other public comments? Please raise your hand. Okay, go ahead. I see JP. You're able to take
Yeah, hi, JP Cataviella with the Dairy Cares Coalition. I just wanted to make a few comments on behalf of the dairy industry. I think the first thing I want to mention is appreciation for the Central Valley Salinity Coalition and the management zone leaders really working hard to coordinate their efforts. I think what we're seeing here is consistent plans throughout the valley, and a lot of effort went into that. These folks meet regularly, not only just to do their own programs in their management zones, but to work with each other and learn from each other, learn from things that are working, learn from things that are not working. And it's made the whole process more efficient and effective. And that is a credit to the leaders of those management zones, but also to the coalition itself that's provided a lot of support from folks like Daniel Kozad and Tess Dunham to make sure this is all working well. I want to give a specific shout out to Perry Clausen with the Valley Water Collaborative. The effort and his team the effort to get these priority 2 management zones off the ground was there was quite a few new priority 2 zones that needed to be brought in to this program. And a lot of them had no idea what they were doing or how to get organized. And many of them went to the Valley Water Collaborative and asked for help, and ultimately asked to join the Valley Water Collaborative. That meant a lot of extra work and a lot of effort on their part to make those management zones work and get together. In some cases, folks came to Perry very late in the game, and really that led to a lot of extra work and extra effort, and these guys handled it admirably, got the job done. There's a number of other folks that I think helped make that a success, but I just really want to congratulate and thank the Valley Water Collaborative for what they pulled off this year. I also want to give a shout out to Nicole Bell for the Kern Water Collaborative efforts. Nicole realized a long time ago, her and leaders of the coalition down there, that this was coming, and they began their planning a long time ago. And as a result, I think they've got a lot of this stuff set up and dialed in and really ready to go. So we appreciate all of that. And if I know my 3 minutes are up, if I could just make one more quick comment, it's that, you know, on behalf of the dairy industry, we've worked throughout the Valley. We have, we are strongly supporting these programs. We have dairy operators serving on many of these, in many of these management zones on their advisory committees, and have provided a significant amount of funding for these things to be successful. So we're very pleased to see how successful they've been so far, and looking forward to more success as these programs get launched this year. And just thank everybody for their efforts.
Great, thank you. Any other public commenters? Please raise your hand or select *9 if you're on the phone. So we could move into open discussion. I just want to throw it out there one more time. Are there any other additional public commenters that would like to speak during the public comment item? Please either raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, select *9 to raise your hand.
Meredith and Jenny, I'll pause for just 1 minute to let the folks know that board member Lee Reeder had to leave, and we have board member Art Baggett, who came in to pinch hit for the remainder. So he's just been on a little while. We will make this recording available to all board members. And I do want to kind of emphasize, I appreciate everyone's comments here. I think we share, you know, the concerns about the rapidity of the early action plans. I know for many of the folks in this room, it was their predecessors that worked on the Basin Plan Amendment, and when the board had a policy decision to make, the kind of grudging acceptance was that the early action plans should be done as quickly as possible when Priority 1 and Priority 2 were rolled out. That was to the detriment of public comment and public engagement. But, you know, I would add, and to be frank, the Basin Plan Amendment was drawn up without any public comment for the early action plans. And we really wanted to kind of extend ourselves beyond what the Basin Plan Amendment requires to get some input as we go through the early implementation of phase 2, and we did the same in phase 1. I would add, for everybody who has made comments about monitoring, about load reductions, long-term strategies, involvement of the communities, there will be multiple options to provide input and multiple public hearings that will be required to get Priority 2 and the remainder of Priority 1 off the ground. Those include a notice and comment period for the final management zone plans and a notice and comment period plus public hearing for the management zone implementation plans, and that will likely be for each and every one of the management zone implementation plans. Those are still going to be ongoing for Priority 1. Adding to that, we will also have a review every 5 years that will be subject to a public hearing for compliance with the exceptions policy. Each one of these management zone implementation plans, including both near-term and long-term drinking water strategies, is required to be reviewed by the board periodically, and that period works to about 5 years. So, you know, we have many hearings and public meetings ahead of us, and certainly engagement with the communities is a very important piece of that. So if it feels rushed at this component, it really is rushed. That was the kind of consensus agreement to get drinking water out there as quickly as possible in the communities that are most affected in Priority 2, and the same was done in Priority 1. And again, there will be multiple opportunities to comment and to lend your opinions, especially about long-term solutions, monitoring, and nitrate load reductions as we continue to roll out this program through the rest of the region. So I just wanted to make note of that. And Art, if you had anything to say before we kind of open the floor to a open discussion, any questions that might come up, I would invite you to do so now.
No comments at this time.
Thanks so much for joining on.
I'd also like to invite Board Member Kadara to speak if she has any comments right now.
Okay, yeah, I think it was overall a great presentation. You know, I remember a couple of years back when we started off with the Priority 1 process, I was quite disturbed at the outreach and how little there had been. You know, knowing that this is a new program that was started, but I think the work that's been done by the stakeholders in the management zones, I think there's considerable improvement in the areas that have how you've gone about outreach to the communities. I would just say that in dealing with communities of color, communities that have been impacted, sometimes it takes a little bit more work. And I heard some of the comments made by the EJ groups, and my own personal opinion is that it's important that as we are addressing the concerns that I also heard where you interacted with youth, school-age kids, because those are the ones that get the parents out. But in the groups where you've had some benefit, where the residents have come out and by word of mouth has gone out and you've gotten participation that way, I would like to see you use those residents that have benefited from the program and passing the word on to others, educate and train them to help them be the ones that help get the word out about the programming. Because I think it's just an important thing that the people that are most impacted, we can't hit and miss. We need to make sure that the communities that are impacted are fully aware and can participate. How you deal with the landlords has been mentioned, to educate them. I think that's a critical piece because we talked about this before, and landlords did not want to participate in the program. If they're not participating and their wells are contaminated, and residents are living there, they're impacted. So working with trying to educate the landlords, I think, is a great thing. And so I'll kind of like just leave it there. There are some other comments I want to make, but I do think that the work that the management zones and the EAP program that's launched a couple of years ago, improvements have been made, and we still have ways to go. And of course, without the EJ groups being here, the communities would not be represented. So I want to thank both parties for being at the table, and of course, the staff for all the work they're doing. And I'll leave it there and continue on with this discussion, and I'll be happy to join in at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Board Member Kadara. I'll now open it up for open discussion. So questions that you have, comments you want to make, discussion you would like to start.
And that's to anyone. So anyone can raise their hand or hit *9 if you're on the phone to raise your hand to speak. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm just wondering if Perry or maybe Deborah can talk about the landlord issue. I mean, we did pass AB 2454 to require landlords to take advantage of the program, although it's questionable whether they'll know about it or not. So I'm just wondering how or if you're incorporating that into your outreach.
Maybe I'll give it a start, Jennifer. So, and then let Perry and Deborah chime in. I mean, we have talked about how we will need to basically notify, in our materials when it goes to a landlord to seek approval, if that's necessary. It isn't always necessary for the resident. Then we will, let them know about AB 2454. So we are working on that to have some, consistency across the management zones to share that information. But I just want to make sure, we did work with Leadership Council and others in the language that went forward in 2454, and we, we're generally supportive of it and believe it's a good step forward. And but we also were very cognizant that it does not create any new responsibilities for the management zones. That was really important for the management zones, and there's language specific in 2454 with respect to that issue. But yes, we are working on having some consistent messaging just so landlords know that there is this law out there now that prevents them from denying access for a resident who wants to utilize the program.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I know with Valley Water, when a person checks that they are they're renting from a landowner, we do offer to contact the landowner, and we have been asked to do that before, and we'll continue to do that. And yeah, as Tess said, we'll be working together to create the messaging that we'll get that word out to the appropriate audiences.
And I have a question. I don't remember it being said earlier, and maybe it was. What has been the success rate with getting the private wells tested now that we have the AB 2454?
AB 2454 just went into effect on January 1st, Denise.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're at the very beginning of it. So I think
what has been the success along the way? Where are we in that process? I know there was a long time, a lot of discussion about how we get the landlords, but what have you seen as being them providing testing? What's been the level of success at that, or has there been?
I think we'll work to get you that answer in
Okay.
the months to come, since we don't have any data on that. Given
Okay.
that
I mean, well, I think that's an important question because that's what we're trying to do, test the wells. So the more we know that we have cooperation and we're getting more wells tested, there's a sense that we're heading in a direction of not only monitoring, but knowing the levels that were talked about earlier. If it's higher, if it's lower, where are we in that whole process? So I'll wait for you guys.
Any other questions or comments? Just raise your hand or select *9. I'm not seeing any, Patrick. I don't know if we want to, the next agenda item is basically closing comments. So Maybe I'll just throw it out there for one more minute. If you have something to say, raise your hand. Go ahead, Perry.
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to thank Jennifer Clary for responding to my request on our new 5 basins. I asked her who she would recommend we be in touch with, and Jennifer, that was great help. We're following up on those leads you gave us, so just a kind of an indication of what I think what we're all doing is working with whatever groups have contacts in our areas to work with us to reach out to these various communities and audiences that we're seeking.
Any other questions, comments, feedback, last call? You can either raise your hand or select *9 if you're on the phone. I am not seeing any. So Jenny, do you want to go into the final closing comments agenda item?
Yes, that sounds great. Thank you, Meredith. I would like to thank everyone for your participation in this workshop today. We appreciate you being here and are very grateful for getting this information out and starting these discussions. The questions, concerns, and comments heard today are very valuable and will be considered by the Central Valley Water Board during the review of the PMZPs and EAPs and throughout the Priority 2 Basins implementation process. As a reminder, implementation for all of the EAPs, unless revisions are requested by the Central Valley Water Board, will begin February 26, 2025. This is also the date that the notices of intent are due from the Priority 2 permittees stating which permitting approach or path they are choosing. I would now like to invite board members Kadara and Baggett to give any last comments before I hand it over to Patrick for his closing comments.
Well, I would just start off by saying I do appreciate the work that the stakeholders have done in this process. Like I said early on, the engagement part was rough around the edges, but I think tremendous progress has been made in establishing communication with the communities, even to the extent that you're giving out a gift card or whatever to get people to respond. I think there's still work to do in the areas of, as I had mentioned earlier, dealing with the monitoring and making sure that residents are able to provide, testing. To do more testing of the wells, so we know, like I was saying earlier, if the levels are higher or if they're lower, they're improvements or whatever. So we still have a ways to go, but getting off to a start of where we are now, going into Priority 2, I think improvements are needed, are being made. And I definitely I'm in agreement with many of the things that were said by the environmental justice groups. I won't say only because in so many instances, the voices of the people are not here. It's the EJ groups that are speaking on their behalf. So the work that's been done by Perry and the Valley Water Group, I think are some good examples. We still have a ways to go, but I think getting off the ground to where we are right now, progress is being made, and we just needed to continue. The long-term solutions, I think, are areas that we still need to improve upon, because so many of the communities are impacted, and the interim solutions of bottled water might be a quick fix, but it's not the real solution. And so I'm appreciative of the work that's been done to this point, and looking forward to our next discussion, and hopefully we'll have more improvements to show. So thank you very much, all of you, for your time this morning. I certainly do appreciate it, and I'm glad to be a part of this session.
Thank you so much, Board Member Kadara. We really appreciate you being here. Board Member Baggett, would you like to say any additional comments?
No, I missed the presentation, so I'm sorry.
Thankfully, through the magic of YouTube, we will be providing them to the board members afterwards. And certainly will be continued opportunities to participate.
Yeah, real quick, I'm just wondering, when we talked about dealing with communication and the different social media you were using, which is good, by the way, because we're trying to reach the residents. But I'm curious about Telemundo and some of the other groups, if there's any way, other media groups that we can get information out to them for those that don't necessarily deal with social media. And then also, just looking at your outreach and going to the different places, communicating with the schools and things like that, the different resource fairs. I mean, I mentioned those things early on, and I see that a lot of that has been done. And I'm just curious about connecting with public health agencies, and when the resource fairs are there with the public health agencies, if you would consider participating in those sessions, because public health, water, the connections are there. And that's just another way of making sure you connect with the community as much as possible. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Thank you so much. All right. Patrick, would you like to give us your closing comments, and then we'll wrap this workshop?
Yeah, no, I just, once again, want to thank everybody for participating. It's a process that we are always constantly learning from. And I think the work at the Priority 2 areas absolutely reflects that. We have more sophisticated outreach. We've learned a lot of lessons, postcards are good. Your neighbor telling you that this is a fantastic program is even better. I'm really heartened to see that we have, actors that extended beyond what the strict basin plan amendment requirements are. So Valley Water Collaborative certainly worked towards getting outreach in the areas before those requirements even hit. Nicole's team is absorbing portions of non-prioritized basins and working on getting information out there within the scope of their management zone. So we see a lot of people really extending themselves. I'm certain there's an opportunity for an economy of scale with a lot of these efforts, but they didn't have to do that, and I think it's really, you see a lot of entities trying to do the right thing by the folks within the communities that stand shoulder to shoulder with their workers, if not working on their lands. So I do appreciate all the efforts to go into this program, and we will be in touch. There will be additional opportunities to comment. This upcoming year will be a big one. Behind the scenes, we will be developing permits to implement and permit amendments to implement the management zone implementation plans in the Priority 1 areas. I'm sure that they will, fly through without controversy. I say that in jest. It is really, really tough to figure out what the role is going to be of all these different entities as we move forward. But at the bottom line is that these programs are designed to protect the folks that are most vulnerable. And I think we will continue to do that both through the proactive measures done by the management zones and the meaningful communication that we're going to have with the communities and their representatives. So I just want to thank everybody for lending their time to this meeting, and I'll turn it back to you, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I want to echo just thanking everyone for participating and all coordinating and collaborating so we can make this implementation as good as possible and use lessons learned from previous in the management Priority 1 zones to get things done even quicker and more effective this time. So really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much. And if there's no other comments, I think we can wrap this up.
Thank you, staff. Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, I'm gonna end the meeting now. Thank you, everyone.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.